Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm joined by Aaron Millar, who hosts the Armchair Explorer Podcast and is a travel writer. Aaron comes on today to talk about his travels, his amazing podcast, which has won some awards, the art of storytelling, and some podcasting tips for anyone looking to start a podcast. Aaron, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, mate. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I've actually just got through with listening to your El Salvador episode, and I absolutely loved it. So if anyone's listening and hasn't checked that out, go back because it's going to totally blow me away as an episode. It's really great, mate. Yeah,
no, I appreciate it. Appreciate that feedback. It's always good to hear it because you don't actually know if it's actually any good.
I know.
thing.
I know. It's just speaking into a void and hoping that the void speaks back every now and again.
Yeah, I do see the figures. I think the San Salvador is the most popular one, but my favorite is the volcano one in Guatemala because I have the volcanic sounds and I bring it up to I turn it all up so you get like a rumbling feeling through the headphones. It's quite cool.
That's amazing. I'm going to check that out. And the El Salvador thing as well, I was thinking it's great at this time too, you know, particularly in America where I live now. There's when you hear El Salvador, all you'll hear is that, you know, the prison and that whole side of things. And it's almost tainting the image of that country just as when it was kind of getting that image back, you know. So yeah, really, really great from that side too.
Yeah, great country to visit. And I think they're doubling their tourists this year. Well, they were before the prison stuff. But yeah, I think I was reading an article. I can read some Spanish, but not too well. But it was kind of saying, I think last year they got 4 million tourists. I think they're going to double it this year.
Oh, wow.
For the year. So I think they're on the up. And I think it is a totally safe country, right? I mean, that was our point in that series to kind of showcase that. But I do get the nervousness of some people with seeing the prison stuff. But if you listen to the episodes, people listening on with my locals I interviewed there, they do talk about that. And it is a thing that they know about, but compared to what it was, I don't know, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it's a much better state than it was.
That's right. And in general, don't trust the media. You know what I mean? It's like that is like,
for a media guy.
Otherwise you'd never go anywhere.
So you mentioned you're in America, so tell the listeners where you're based.
Yeah. So I'm based in a little town called Louisville, just outside of Boulder, Colorado. I grew up in Brighton. Well, actually, I was born in America. My mom's American, so I was actually born on the East Coast of America. And then I moved over as a little kid to Brighton on the South Coast of England. Kind of grew up there. And then, you know, I did the whole move to London, work in London and that whole thing. And I had a kid, my first child. And it was one of those where I'd always dreamed of like living abroad or traveling, doing more of that kind of thing. And then I was like staring down the gun of this is going to be the next 20 years of your life. And I just like pressed eject and ran away to the mountains and I'm still here.
I think that's the London effect, isn't it? It's a young person's game. I think it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was there for university and it's tough going as a student. You need money. You need money.
Yeah, it's a place that unless you're earning a lot and enjoying it, there's no reason for you to be there. But it's a beautiful city. I do miss a lot of parts of it and still have a lot of friends there too. Yeah,
how was it growing up in Brighton? Like, if you're from UK, you kind of think, oh, Brighton would be pretty cool.
Well, it is. And by the way, James, if you can't hear this, James is an Ipswich fan. And so I've, underneath my shirt, I've worn my Brighton and Hove Albion t-shirt.
Looks great.
Just to rub it in.
I thought we were going to survive, but looks like not now.
No, Brighton was an amazing place to grow up. You know, it's a very liberal town. It's, a very creative, artistic town. I was really into music. I still am into music, but I was really into like playing music with my friends and that kind of thing. And it was a great place to do that. So yeah, I still love it. I absolutely love it there.
And what was the early travel memories? Did you travel a lot of the UK or was there some abroad travel? Like, can you remember what maybe ignited some wanderlust or?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've kind of thought about this because it's not always just like one thing, you know, but I think the deepest one for me was, so I moved over to England with my mom and what would be my stepdad, what would become my stepdad. But my dad was in America and he was like someone that, you know, I saw him once a year and he was a big hiker. And what his thing was is we would meet in Switzerland, which is somewhere he'd gone for many years. We'd meet in Switzerland and we'd go hiking together for 2 weeks. And so like from the age of, you know, I would say probably 11 to 17, I went hiking with my dad for 2 weeks in Switzerland every summer. If you haven't, have you been to Switzerland? It's like mountains.
Not in the mountains, no.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, the mountains in Switzerland, like I'm a big mountain person. Obviously, I've moved to Colorado, and the Rockies are beautiful, but they've got nothing on the Swiss Alps. Like the Swiss Alps are just ridiculous. Like it's like every single view you look at is just the most beautiful mountain view you've ever seen, and I think that really just sort of fired that piece in me about just being outdoors. He was quite a hardcore hiker, so we'd go on these really, really long hikes, and I loved it. I just fell in love with it, and I've kind of dipped my toes in all sorts of adventure sports since then, but hiking is like truly my first love, and the mountains too. And when I kind of decided to move to America, that Colorado was top of my list because I wanted to have that. Like I love the ocean. Being from Brighton, I grew up next to the ocean, and that has got a special energy to it, I think. But the mountains, there was something about it that always just drew me to them. And so I think that was probably the first time I really caught the bug.
I think that's why Vancouver's quite rare, isn't it? Because we have the sea and the mountains. I'm 10 minutes from the top of the mountain, Cypress Mountain, and I'm 10 minutes walk from the water. So, 5 minutes really. So I think that's why people love coming here. That's why it's probably quite expensive. But the lure of kind of going up to ski and then you can go down to the beach on the same day is quite appealing for some people.
Yeah. And I always think like those places where those two kind of ecosystems meet, like that's where like a lot of energy and interesting stuff happens, whether it's like wildlife or just like, the vibe of a place. So yeah, I've only been to Vancouver once, but I loved it. I love that whole British Columbia area. It's you live in a beautiful place.
Yes, a special area, I must admit. And Switzerland has got that, I guess, reputation in Europe, right, to being that quite special place to go and being in amongst the mountains, because the Alps is probably the best there, isn't it, I think, in Switzerland. That might be controversial, I'm not sure, but I think I read somewhere the other day that
don't tell France or Italy that.
It's Switzerland, yeah.
French or Italian listeners,
I'm not sure.
Plug your ears now.
But yeah, I think, my dad growing up, who's never travelled abroad, right, he's never been anywhere. Hasn't got a passport, but he would say the place he would like to go to is Switzerland. You probably watch it on The Sound of Music, like Austria, Switzerland, wherever. But I think he thinks, I'd love to go there, and he's got no idea. But just has that sort of pull, I think, for I guess if you're into hiking as well. Yeah.
I think it's a bit legendary when it comes to that. And it's also got this great infrastructure too, where, what you would often do is you just get the cable car up to like the high part of the mountains, and then you get to sort of walk along on top. And, as soon as you get up there, you get all the best amazing views. And sometimes it's fun, like making your way up there. I always feel like the view is relative to how hard you earned that view. But at the same time, it can be nice just getting the cable car up and looking at the view from there too.
I think one of the best things we did in our year trip a few years ago was the Alps train. We went from Kerr on the border and got the Bernina Express over to, Tirano in Italy. It takes about 4 hours, the panoramic train. It only costs like £20-30 if you book in advance. And it was just incredible. Like it was going from nice weather to snow in about 2 hours, and you get off and you have like a bit of a walk at the top. That's quite incredible, and it's quite a nice way to see the Alps if you don't want to hike.
That's a great tip. I haven't actually heard of that before, so that's a great tip.
Yeah, the Bernina Express, would recommend it.
Bernina Express.
For the UK, are you quite well travelled in the UK, do you think, or not?
Within the UK, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes and no, I think. I don't know what well travelled in the UK. Like where's the sort of grade of it?
Great question.
I don't know. I love Scotland. My wife's from Scotland, so I've travelled a fair bit around there, but also like not really even scratched the surface. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those where I absolutely love the country, but I've done a fair bit up there. I love the Lake District. I think Lake District's amazing, but never been to like place like Cornwall. Like, like blatant amazing places I've never been.
Devon as well. Oh.
Devon. Yeah,
not
been to Devon, but it just kept going because everyone's like, nah, Cornwall's amazing. But I think there's a lot to see there.
What about those isles off the coast of Cornwall? The Isles of Scilly.
Oh, yeah.
In there?
No, the silly. Yeah, I always laugh about that when there's nothing silly about them, by the way, James.
Yeah. But they look like
they're very serious, actually.
Yeah, very serious.
Yeah, exactly. It's like little gems like that as well. So never been to Northern Ireland, barely been to Wales, so it's there's a lot still to do for a small place. And I think being out here, I don't know how you feel in Canada, but you realize how kind of small it is really as a place. Like when you grow up there, you feel it's like this like big place, but like people drive, the equivalent of, up to the south to north of the UK and back just to go like, just for like a day, pretty much. They're like, oh, we're going to drive to the Grand Canyon and spend a day there and drive back. It's like crazy out here.
I mean, it's crazy the distance, isn't it? Because we just had a long weekend in Kelowna, which is about 4 to 5 hour drive east of here, and people won't even bat an eyelid to go and drive there for a weekend. It's just a normal thing. But like, yeah, UK, if you're going from Brighton 4 to 5 hours north, I mean, where are you going to end up? You could probably be in Yorkshire, aren't you?
Yeah, I know. And that would be outrageous, wouldn't it? A 4-hour drive.
Yeah. Outrageous, yeah. But I do feel like it makes me feel a bit guilty for not traveling UK because it's so small. But hey.
You never appreciate what you've got. That's right. And that's actually one of my missions this year is to see more of Colorado, because it's been easy for that to skip away too. And so, you're always looking outward from where you are to where am I going to go next. But I'm really trying this summer, particularly just to like stay at home and explore all those little corners that I haven't been to yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you were moving into the career aspect, did you think, okay, that will be within travel? Or was writing or being a journalist more of a thought first, and then I'll do that, and it's travel sort of came along as a byproduct? How did that work out?
Yeah, I've got quite an interesting story of how I got into travel journalism. So I started out in the music industry. I worked in the music industry in my 20s. I was like, music was my thing. And then I kind of got burnt out from that. And, a lot of stuff I'd started and begun just kind of hadn't worked out. But prior to that, like writing was always my sort of first love. And I think during that period, I realized that, I was a much better writer than I was a musician, but I wanted to do something creative. And so I was kind of like just writing a few articles and trying to get them published, and nothing much happened. And then a few months after, and I kind of said to myself, I had like £1,000 in the bank, and I was like, right, if this money runs out, then that's it. I've not made it as a writer, And so I was kind of just getting little piecemeal bits of work here and there. And then I came up with this idea. So travel journalism is, I suppose, is different in some ways to like content creation. Journalism, when you're writing for like newspapers or magazines, a lot of it is about like the hook, the sort of why now of that story. And so a lot of times you're sort of following ideas of like where the story is rather than choosing where you want to go. And because of that, like ideas are really important. Ideas are king in a way. If you can have a great idea, then you can write lots and lots of different articles and stories off the back of that. Anyway, so where Brighton is in the South Downs, beautiful rolling hills of the South Downs. And they had just turned that whole area that I grew up into a national park a year ago, the South Downs National Park. And basically I thought to myself as the year anniversary was coming up, what I should do is I should walk the South Downs Way, which is from Eastbourne to Winchester. So it covers the whole sort of breadth of the park. It's about 100 miles. And this has been walked for centuries by, like sheep drovers and travelers and pilgrims and stuff like that, because they would follow the kind of spine of the downs because it was easier to travel on. And because of that, like all these, really historic coaching inns or pubs, right, had kind of sprung up alongside the trail. Some of them like 500, 600 years old now. And so what I worked out is that you could do this as a pub crawl. And that was my idea. So I pitched the idea of I'm going to do 100-mile pub crawl from Eastbourne to Winchester, stopping off at like all the pubs along the way that the trail kind of connects to. And that was, that's a whole other story. But that kind of led to, that was a great trip. Apart from the fact I did it in February and it was, yeah,
brutal.
I think even a submarine wouldn't have kept me dry that week, but yeah. Luckily, when you write about it afterwards, it's all rosy. And that sort of led into like doing some outdoor adventure travel writing and stuff like that. But my really big break happened. I pitched this idea to the Sunday Times. It was the time, I don't even remember, but like Brian Cox was on the TV, like space and kind of astrotourism was just like bubbling up, this quite big, interesting thing. I found out that Tenerife is the best place for stargazing in Europe. It's where all the sort of telescopes and stuff are.
Okay.
Right up high in Mount Teide National Park. So I pitched this idea of a galactic safari in Tenerife. I thought it just sounded cool.
Sounds good.
And I sent it to a bunch of people, right? And one of them was the Sunday Times. And like this was all like crazy hit and hope stuff.
Yeah.
And a month later, nothing had happened. And then suddenly I get a call, and it's like, who's this? Should I even answer it? Pick it up, and it's like, hello, this is Christine Walker from the Sunday Times. I've seen your idea, but who are you? You're not ready to write for us. And and I was like, oh, right. And she was like, well, here's what I'll do. If you can find a way to get out there and write the article, I'll read it. That's all I can promise. And so I totally blagged it at that point. I phoned up the Tenerife Tourism Board, said I had a commission from the Sunday Times. I got all the hotels and flights for free. I phoned up Brian. I got hold of Brian May from Queen, because he did his...
As you do, yeah.
Yeah, because he did, I knew someone who knew someone who knew someone. And because he did his PhD in astrophysics.
He did, yeah.
In there, and he was just about to do something there. So I set this whole thing up, blagged this whole trip, went there, did it, I wrote it, and she published it. And then after that, I just I was Aaron Millar from the Sunday Times, and I kept blagging it from there, basically.
That's an amazing story, isn't it? That's crazy. Do you know what I find funny, like, amongst all that, is the classic British mentality is, do you know what? I can do an article about pubs and drinking on a walk.
I combined all my favorite things in one. Yeah. It's the highlight of my life.
But that's a great break, though, isn't it? I guess that kind of, for me, is great to hear, because that's inspiring in terms of getting outside of the box, trying to figure something out, like what could work. Yeah. Let's try it. Let's give it a go. No guarantees, but I think that kind of requires a bit of that sometimes to get going, doesn't it?
Well, as a freelancer, I'd always go for stuff that was, guaranteed stuff based on relationships I already had, and sort of like low-hanging fruit type stuff. But I'd always have one big, crazy, low probability idea, but if it came off, it would be a total game changer.
Yeah.
And I always feel like you always need to have one or two of those in the air floating around, because that's really when things completely change, right? Like, you can't rely on that. But if you don't ever have that, you'll never really... Well, it's going to be a slow path to getting anywhere else that you might want to go. So I always try and have one or two of those big, crazy ideas in the background at all times. But yeah, I don't know. I would encourage people to have crazy ideas and go for it, and don't be afraid. I think a lot of the time as well that, it's the whole imposter syndrome of, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. But really, I guess, and for some things that's true, right? Like, I'd love to be, a rock star. I'm not good enough. I'd love to be a footballer. I'm definitely not good enough, right?
Same.
But
not quick enough. It's different, but
yeah. No, I'm all over the shop. Not good enough. But like, if you find your thing, whatever that thing is, I think you can double down on it sometimes and just believe in yourself and go for it, because you never know. And oftentimes, there's a great thing. My mate, Jonathan Thompson, he's a really successful travel writer, and he's actually now does a TV show as well. But he always said to be successful, you need to be successful. There's basically three components to it, right? You need to be nice, you need to be on time, and you need to be good. But you only need to be two of those. And if you think about it, if you're nice and on time, it doesn't really matter if you're good, right?
Yeah,
if you're good and on time, it doesn't matter if you're nice. You know what I mean? Like,
it's
you can work it out.
Say that. Yeah, because in my music degree at BIM, they said the same thing pretty much. I think the fourth one was a bit of luck, but
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, they said if you're just a nice person, you turn up to the studio on time, that's half the battle. I guess with music though, you will get shown up if you're trying to shred a guitar and you can't hit the notes. But I guess there is an element of truth alignment there with journalism and music to a degree.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you say, at least with writing, you can tear up draft 16 and go again. Yeah. There's no doing that with the guitar in the studio.
No, not on
So
record,
are you a guitarist
way.
Then? Is that your instrument?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Well, we're halfway there to a band. I'm a drummer, so I just hang around.
Oh, wow,
with
to the bass. Oh, wow. And a singer.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. That's awesome.
I actually had the same story as you. I got burnt out through the relentless, as 4 years BIM in London. I was just relentless performing and practicing every day. And actually, if you don't look after yourself, you will burn out. And when you start to not make money, that can be an issue. So, I sort of changed direction to travel, interestingly. But I still have that hankering to play guitar. Maybe not as serious as I probably should, but I do just want to sit down for 2 hours and just whack some tunes out. But
you should, mate. Yeah. That's the thing, is that you never... I've never done it at a level where there was that level of pressure and intensity that you would have done it at that sort of professional level. But for me, it was always about like making music with my friends was always like the best thing in the world, right? Yeah. And that's really what music's about for me. And I just love that. And I'm still doing that to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I should really get back into it. You give me something to think about there. I
actually bassist and a singer. That's all we need.
Yes, a singer, yeah. If you're a bass and a singer, that'd be ideal. My 2 questions with your comments about the having the idea and going for it. Do you think, first question, can that be translated to podcast? If you're a podcaster listening, and that could be travel or another type of podcast. But let's go with travel because we're on a travel podcast. If you had a travel idea or something that's coming up that could be quite significant, do you think you could pitch idea like, do you know what, I'll do a podcast series, 6 episodes, whatever, because I think you mentioned one at the TravelCon. I don't want to say it in case people nick your idea, but you mentioned like a big anniversary coming next year or this year.
Yeah.
Do you think if you can pitch that could work as well?
Well, I think the harder thing with content creation is that there's an element of a numbers game. Like part of it is the creativity in the content you create, but also it's about the exposure that you can offer. And that is the hard thing about being truly like independent. Being an independent content creator, if you can make it happen, is fantastic, and then you have the freedom to just like tell the stories you want to tell. But if you're a freelance journalist, you don't necessarily have the freedom to tell the stories you want to tell. You'd have to tell the stories that sell and that the editors want. But the of it is you're sort of playing off the back of that already well-established platform and name. So it's a little bit easier in some ways to blag it. But I guess I would say, it might be harder to have your own platform if you're starting from scratch. But you got to start sometime, right? So you might as well get going with that. But at the same time, if you're a creative person, whether it's you're a writer or, a videographer or whatever, you can still have that idea and you can still do that same model of partnering with, maybe an already established podcast and say, hey, I've got this great idea for a series. What if we did this with you and I brought in, this destination or this, these people and this local guide and we did this whole thing. I guess I would encourage you to think creatively, think like a creator, but maybe try and think about how you can be the middle person between connecting the people with platforms, the people that want those audiences, and you be the creative person, you be the idea machine that kind of is the glue between those two things.
It's quite a hard thought process because you think all the ideas have been done before, don't you? But it kind of leads to my second question of do you always have in your mind every year there's probably 2 or 3, I don't know, it could be big anniversaries, could be a new opening of something. Do you always just keep an eye on those sort of things to potentially pitch for that year?
Well, I think those are the big long ball type of ideas in some ways, even though they're in many ways you get the best chance of doing those highly topical ideas. But when it comes to the podcast, it's not like that at all for me anymore. We do a bunch of different types of episodes, but our kind of signature episode that we started out with, and that's really truly my first love still, are these kind of immersive documentary stories where I'll interview a guest and kind of chop that in between some scripted voiceover and music and stuff and try and present it as a continuous story that really hopefully drops people into that experience and shows them a piece of it. But for that, it's like, what's so amazing about it is I'm just looking for pure story. Like what is this incredible, what is your story? And that's such a refreshing thing for me in a way, because it's like, I can choose what I want to share. And like being a travel writer for me, obviously, it's, the perks of traveling are like, unreal, right? I wouldn't have been able to do anything like the stuff that I've done or share those things with my family either. So I'm eternally grateful for that. But beyond that, if you were to ask me like why this type of writing, why this type of podcasting, it's because I'm really passionate about putting out, I guess, an idea or a way of thinking about the world and the outdoors and people and stuff like that I think that I'm really personally passionate about. And so I'm always trying to, pick stories that give that life in a way, you know, without having to sort of preach your message, whatever that might be. But like, what is it that you're passionate about? Like, what are the stories that you really want to share because you want to impact the world in that way? And then, you know, find those stories, tell those stories, because those are the ones that, you know, make a difference for you. And for me, that's still why I do it. And it's the number one thing. That and the free travel.
I think, yeah, I was then going to say that as people may have listened on this podcast, I do sort of nominate Aaron's podcast, Armchair Explorer, as probably the biggest influence in travel podcasting because
thanks,
I like that idea because the genuine feeling is, as we were talking before the recording, is that I do want to try and show, or at least give a sound of a travel experience where potentially, if you're a listener, you might not get it. And I think we do have to rival YouTube to an extent, because on YouTube, you can see it, and that is a huge advantage. But I think, well, how can we rival YouTube in terms of the experience? And I think, you know, these conversations are great. You can go and just, you know, do 20 minutes about the best things to see and do in a place, great. But what about collecting sounds and making you feel part of it? I think that is got to be worth its weight in gold, because you do come along for the journey. I think if that can inspire someone to go and take that trip and see it for themselves, or if they can never travel, but they get to experience that with themselves in their headphones, I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's the best way I can see travel podcasting going, because it kind of brings you along for the journey. And there's no bias there. I don't put bias into it. I just say what I see, what I'm experiencing, and kind of give that genuine experience across.
No, I love your style. Like I said, I really love your style. I think you do it really, really well. And it comes across, you know, like I always think travel content is informational and inspirational, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, like, and I guess I lean quite heavily on the inspirational side. But I think what you do, which is really interesting, is it's like really both. Like, it's very informational in the sense that, you know, I listened to that episode about San Salvador, and I'm following you on that 2-3 day weekend in San Salvador, and I really feel like I'm with you. And that piece is inspirational, but you're also revealing all these secrets, you know, and revealing all this information of what to do and what it's like, even to the point of like, you know, I'm walking from my hostel to the first place and I feel safe. It feels like there's people are cool but you know, stuff like that. So you really balance that very, very well. And I think that that's what we need to lean on. Like, going back to YouTube, I think that, you know, audio does something different than video, right? Video is powerful for showing you something. It's got wow. You know, it's obviously our eyes are our number one sense, so it's got all that going for it. But audio does what really good writing does. You know, good writing, if you get it right, comes alive in the imagination of the reader. And because it comes alive in the imagination of the reader, they own it in a way that they don't own that movie. You know, that movie is a spectacle they've seen. But if you read that book and you love that book's kind of a part of you in a much deeper way. And I think that that's what we need to lean on in audio, is how can we use the power of this medium to tell stories that really achieve that come alive in the imagination of the people that are listening to it. And I think using some of that in-field ambience that you recorded, using some music, using all those types of things, and the way that you did the voiceover and the way that it's kind of scripted but also natural, it's pulled together in a way that's, you know, in the same way that like a really good article would, I think, give people a glimpse of what the highlights are, but also, if you get it right, like I say, just give them a glimpse of what it feels like to be there, not just what it looks like.
The feeling, that's the thing.
Yeah,
how did you come up with that idea originally? Because was that back in COVID, right? You started Armchair Explorer?
Yeah. So, because I'd sort of been in the music industry prior to that. I wasn't a musician in it. I was working for a management company, but I knew my way around studio, and I'd always kind of thought to myself, wouldn't it be great to tell all these stories, but like with music and all sorts of other stuff. And I was listening to podcasts, and I'm like, well, why is no one doing this? Everyone's just doing interviews. Why is no one doing any of these more sort of involved things? And then, you know, I talked about it, COVID hit, and it was like, right, well, this is it. If I don't do it now, it's definitely never going to happen. And so I just went and made my first episode. And then I realized why no one else was doing it, because it took me like
bloody long
40 hours and it was still terrible. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of shot myself in the foot in some ways there. Like, you know, it's creatively, it's really satisfying, but it is an investment of time, as you know. Like, it's not easy. And, you know, the saying about writing is that easy reading is hard writing. And it's so true, you know, to get that flow and to get that easiness, so it all comes together, is quite hard. There's quite a lot of behind the scenes that go into it. So, but it's worth it, right? Because it's also about putting that great content out there and hopefully inspiring people along the way.
But even now, there's not many podcasts doing it, is there? I mean,
no.
I've dipped in this year. I don't know too many other ones that would do the same sort of style, right?
No, I really don't know many that do it at all. I still see mostly that interview format. And don't get me wrong, like, that can be great. You know, it's a different format altogether, but it can be great. But I still think, particularly with travel, because it's about place, because you can hear people, like when you interview the guides in San Salvador and you hear them, you get that level of trust about visiting there that you wouldn't get just from reading that. Yeah. And okay, you say, oh, you know, you could film that guy and whatever. But here's the thing. When you shove a camera in someone's face, they freeze up, and they, like most people, and they become nervous, or they become very like presenter-like about it, right? Yeah. They're very often not natural. Almost no one is natural. And it's quite hard to edit, right? Because you can't just chop bits and pieces together. Yeah. But with audio, they very quickly forget that there's a microphone there. And so you can just develop this natural rapport, as you would do as a traveler. And then I think you can get something of their real personality, like very natural, when, you know, which you can't get on camera too.
Yeah. Those two guys on the El Salvador ones are quite interesting, Carlos and Dave. I actually did film Dave, but he's such a larger than life character. He didn't care. He was just stoked to be on the podcast.
You get one of them.
Yeah. He's just like happy to say anything. He's even looking at the camera when he's speaking. He's really good. But Carlos is like, yeah, I'm not too comfortable with English. Can we just do audio? I'm like, yeah, absolutely fine, no worries. So it had two different personalities there. But I think that does shine through in the audio. You can probably tell that Dave is a bit larger and live. He does his tours and he's quite funny and stuff, and he's very enthusiastic, which comes across, I think, in the audio for sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And for other travel podcasts, I think there is a slight caveat here, is that we were both in the music side, and I guess we did have that access to production. So I learned some of that in my course, right? And maybe that is a leg up to maybe someone starting from scratch who's probably never done like anything in a production studio or whatever. So I think there is quite a lot of learning involved when you start to think about the reason it takes 40 hours is you've got to collect the sounds, you've got to I storyboard it. I've got to think, well, what am I saying here? What happens here? Can I remember even what happened here? Look back in the video. Like, there's all these things going on. It is quite a long ass production thing, but I think it is worth it in the end, because I actually am quite super proud of those, because they take so long to do, and the end product is pretty cool. Yeah,
absolutely. And it is, you know, I would say it's sort of not easy, and it's also easier than you'd think, right? Like, I didn't, you know, I bought Logic to start using this. I'd never used Logic before. This was just as music editing software for Apple production software. But you know, GarageBand comes on every Mac too. Right? It's super simple. And, you know, for me, it was just about playing, right? Playing around. You know, I would you'd have to edit the kind of interview together, and that can be a little bit of a finicky thing. But then, you know, you're just like, there's all these different websites where you can, you know, sign up to and find all sorts of different songs and sounds that are, you know, legal to use if you sign up for it, and just messing around with that, and where does it sound good, and adding sounds to stories. I thought it was great. I loved it. And I was absolutely terrible at it for like a long time. And I still go back and listen to those first episodes and cringe. Of course. Yeah. But at the same time, I always say, like, if you go back to listen to your first episode and you think it's great, you've not learned anything. No, you've not improved.
That is terrible.
So just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the memories from previous recordings. I used to do just the one USB mic between two people. I'm like, oh right, God, this is carnage and don't sound that great. But yeah, you do learn that sort of stuff. I didn't have like great microphone knowledge, I suppose. That's the big learning thing I learned.
Yeah.
But collecting sounds is actually easier than you think. You can make it as technical as you want, but a lot of those sounds just come from the iPhone and the video.
Yeah, the iPhone actually picks up some good stuff. Yeah, it really does. It's not bad.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's getting better. I'm sure there's tons of apps there I haven't even checked out that do it even better.
Yeah. And we're kind of jumping ahead here, but as we're here, because we're talking about the Armchair Explorer, I think you were voted, what a Guardian named you as the best travel podcast to check out. That must have been a nice surprise early doors.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky because it was COVID, and I think a lot of people wanted to escape wherever they were at. And so it was a good time to put out a podcast that helped people do that, if only in their imagination. So I was pretty lucky to have done that at that time in some ways. And but no, it's always nice when someone says your podcast is all right. So yeah, especially when it's The Guardian.
Yeah, it helps. And what about, how would you describe your podcast now? I mean, you started like that. Do you still do those type of episodes, or just for people who maybe not sure who you are, like, do you do different types of episodes now, or is it always still that core idea?
So it's still the core idea, and that's kind of like behind everything we do. And I think the other part of the core idea is looking for the deeper sort of themes and threads of a place, of a story, right? So it's not just, we did a story about dinosaurs and dark skies in Utah, but that actually becomes a story about, deep time and what it's like when you look at that kind of dinosaur fossil and get that hit of holy shit, it's real, or whatever, And so it becomes about this like kind of deeper thread that sort of throws, takes us into that place. So it's kind of both those things, no matter the format, and hopefully just great guests who are really the star of the show. But yeah, we do that signature piece I talked about, which was that kind of documentary piece. We do a lot of on location stuff like you do, which is a lot of fun to do. And then we've just started doing a couple other things which are more like short form stuff, which are like bucket list clips. So like things that, might be an amazing experience that like, we did one recently of the Everest of cage dives, which is like where, I don't know if you know about this, it's in South Australia in the Neptune Islands. Yes. Rodney Fox, the whole story there. Yeah. So anyway, you go to the bottom of the cave you basically go diving with great whites at the bottom of the ocean floor. So super intense, but a bucket list experience. Maybe not for everyone, but something you might want to hear about. And we just started doing some destination guides and stuff as well. But yeah, it's, we're trying to offer a variety of stuff, but at the same time, I hope it all kind of comes back to that one thing, which is really cool people telling amazing stories. And hopefully we showcase that in a way that is well paced, because I always think that's important. Yes. Well paced, as immersive as it can be, with music, with sound, and hopefully it inspires you to think about one thing differently or in a new way.
So how do you find the new stories or the new experiences?
So a lot with the guests, lucky to get pitched a lot of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
So that works out really well, but we don't do many of them, so always looking for a variety of stuff like we did one recently with Felipe Massetti, who rode a horse from Canada to Brazil. He was originally from Brazil, emigrated to Canada, and then his parents got kicked out of Canada. Their visa ran out when he was 18, and he rode his two horses, ended up 3 horses all the way back home. So incredible story. And it's people like that, but it's also a variety of stuff. Like at the moment I really want to do a story with, you ever seen those mad like cliff jumpers and stuff like that? I don't know if you're stuck in that Instagram hole, but
yeah, because I can't swim, so the thought of it just makes me cringe. But crikey.
Oh man, but there was like some of the real top ones there. The stuff they do is insane. I'd love to kind of find out what that's like to stand on the edge of that cliff, to go searching, exploring for these places and find these little coves and just hope that the water is deep enough and know that if you got the target to do it. Like I kind of want to get into all of that. And then also like, what is it to overcome what's it like to stand there? And how do you then overcome your fear to do it? And then how in overcoming that fear, how does that change you or change your outlook on life? So it's all that kind of stuff. But yeah, always looking for stories. If you've done anything mad or crazy or hilarious, let me know.
Hilarious, yeah. I was then thinking about base jumpers. I don't know if you've done many episodes of those. Those guys are also a different level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I interviewed Jeb Corliss ages ago, who's one of the number one wingsuit guys. And oh my God, does he have one of the most hideous accident stories you'll ever hear. I don't even know if I should just share it now, but it's bad.
Do you want to hear it? Yeah,
of course.
I'm thinking a broken back, but I could be wrong.
No, it's way more interesting than that. So he was And this is like one of his. This is like the
Yeah.
first one. But he was he was just kind of starting out in his career. He was still an amateur at this point. And so he was looking for like cool places in South Africa to like jump off. And at this point, he was just a base jumper. He hadn't become a wingsuit flyer yet. And he found this, and so they were exploring really deep into it, trying to find all these cool spots. And so they found this one spot, this waterfall, like way, way back in, you know, away from any towns or cities. And the idea was like his mate was going to film him and he was just going to jump off this waterfall, which was, I don't know, maybe 100 and something feet high. So not massive. Anyway, when he does it, what happens is the air from the power of the waterfall immediately sucks him into the waterfall. So he jumps off, and then as soon as his chute comes out, he's sucked into the waterfall and just slammed down on the rocks, at which point he thinks he's going to drown.
Yeah.
And he's underwater for a couple of minutes, but he manages to crawl up on the side, on his hands, at which point he realizes that he's paralyzed from the waist down. He can barely move. He knows he's broken his back somewhere. Yeah. So he's lying there, and where he is, it's going to take his friend at least a couple of hours to walk down and to get to him. So he's lying there in the banks of this river, and he can't move, and he's covered in cuts and bruises. Yeah. And then these crabs start to crawl over him, and they start to eat him. It's awful, isn't it? And he had to
eat alive by crabs.
He had to lie there for 2 hours whilst crabs ate him until his friend came down and rescued him. So, yeah.
But how did his friend rescue him? Because like, he's got to somehow figure out how to move him, right? And maneuver him safely. And
I mean, this friend just managed to like call the search and rescue or whatever and
fight
get
off
the crabs off him. Yeah, but then it took like another 6 hours for the people to get there. And then they had to like stretcher him out. It took him like 10 hours to carry him out. But yeah, he was jumping off Table Mountain a couple of years later because he's an absolute nutter.
He's an absolute moron, yeah.
Yeah, one or the other. Probably a little bit of both.
Do those like type of stories, if you hear them on your podcast, do they make you just like be in awe a little bit of or just think how stupid they are? Like, do you sometimes get surprised about how crazy the story could be?
Yeah, it depends. Like, I think something like that, it's more like, how crazy could the story be? Like, I can't see myself doing that. But then there's, you know, and there's like big stories like that, like, you know, people walking the length of the Amazon River or stuff like that, where you're like, wow, this is cool. I would kind of like to experience this, but I'm not going to dedicate 2.5 years of my life to do that. And it's such an ordeal. But it's amazing to hear those stories. But then there's other stories where you feel, I think a lot of time people are also, you know, what they're attracted to. What a lot of the guests always say is that they're in this place in their life, and these are just normal people, not famous adventurers or anything. They're in this place in their life where maybe they were unhappy, they felt a bit trapped, they weren't happy with their career, they felt they were going nowhere, and they'd always dreamed of doing something. And then they just found a way to actually do it. They found a way to take that step, you know, and whether it's, you know, going for, you know, like one guy, and this does sound extreme, but he went for like 1,000-mile Africa, right? And it took him 3 months. So he took 3 months out of his life to do it. And it was a huge adventure, but he did that. It was like within his reach in some ways and kind of within all of our reach. So I hope one of the things that people take away from all of this is, you can just do it, right? Like it's not easy. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's your life, right? And if you are dreaming of doing a big adventure or backpacking around Asia or whatever that might be, whatever the level of your adventure is, your dream is, you know, it doesn't happen instantly. But if you kind of have that in your mind, what everyone says on the show is, you can kind of create the space in your life, the opportunity of your life to do that. And not one of them comes back the same. Every single person comes back changed in a positive way and changes their life after that.
Because I think you're kind of going into the realms of psychology a little bit, because there is the travel experience, of course, but I guess there's an element to it of understanding why they've got to that point, how they achieve the aim, I guess the repercussions afterwards. I guess it is going into like real life. I don't know what you call it. It is psychology, but like they're just going through life and they need to do something that's a bit extreme or different to the norm. And it's quite an interesting balance.
Well, I think a lot of people feel that there is a kind of accepted path to life, right? Like you go through school, maybe you go to university, you get a job, you do whatever, you get married, have kids, you know, and I followed a bunch of that path too, right? Like not, you know, I'm married with kids, but I think that, you know, you can get stuck on that treadmill of expectation where it's like your friends and your family expect you to do the usual thing. And it's quite hard to go against the grain of that, you know?
Yeah.
It's really hard. And when you do, people are going to question it and think you're a bit mad for doing it. But that path is only there because it's become like a norm of society to do that.
Yes.
You know, if you go somewhere else in the world, and this is the great thing about travel, you go somewhere else in the world, there's a completely different norm about how you should live your life. Right. That there's nothing about the way in the West that path that is set in stone or is the best way. Right. You have to choose the best way for your life. And I always think that is the ultimate kind of adventure of life in many ways is no one can tell you how to make your life meaningful. You have to give it meaning by doing something that you care about. And, for some people, that is travel or related to travel. And for a lot of people, travel's like a catalyst to find out what that is and to get there. And sometimes it's just getting off that treadmill of that, like that normal kind of expected path. Sometimes just by jumping off it for even a month or something like that can give you enough perspective to see your life in a broader way than that.
I think you just summed up in a nutshell definitely why I do the podcast. I think maybe the same for you as well, but about trying to not convince people, but just trying to give them an alternative way of thinking about life or even travel or whatever, and trying to get them thinking about, you know what, maybe I do need to do an extreme adventure for 3 months, or I just need to go away somewhere completely different. Could be just a normal trip. It's interesting because I do another podcast. I produce another one called Career Breaks, which is along the same lines, but it's more about taking a break from your career because it can get all intense, right? So I think these two podcasts combined is about trying to seek the alternative and don't settle for the norm if you're not happy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in that too, I always feel like there's a thing about, you know, personal identity too, which is like your, you know, the kind of cliques you grow up in, which are like your family, your school, your town, that sort of sets the sort of like parameters of the kind of person you should be. And if that works for you, that's great.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work for you, that's not great. And then maybe you have to go and travel and find some different parameters that you can bring into your life.
Yeah, and I think that's why I like to get the different type of guests on. I mean, I've had the most extreme has been probably my friend Frank in Quebec, who hitchhiked the Congo River.
Oh, wow.
That took him 3 months, nearly died twice, had to send a voice note to his parents saying he's got malaria, he's going to die, and all this sort of stuff. Saw pygmies, and the story was 3.5 hours long, and I couldn't edit any of it because it was too good.
Amazing.
But completely raw. But that is the extreme level, and I think if he came on now to talk about that, he'd probably give it a different story, like about how he thought he was addicted to travel and the adventure, and he's completely changed his ways. But then that is just as good, I think, as just someone who goes to Southeast Asia for the first time internationally, like they've never been anywhere else, but like, I'm going to go to that, and that's equally as inspirational. It should be anyway to any listener, because
it's completely relative. Yeah, it's relative to where you're at, you know, and maybe just start by going on a really, really, really long pub crawl.
And that is an experience in England. Let's put it that way. What were you like at the end of the pub crawl when you finished?
Oh, it was a mess. I'll tell you, the only thing about like walking tipsy is great, but you know, the top of the downs, there's no cover whatsoever, no trees, no nothing. So trying to find somewhere for a pee break is an absolute nightmare after you've nailed 2 pints at lunchtime.
That kind of brings me nicely into you as a traveller, actually.
Yeah.
What type of traveller are you? Has it changed throughout your life, or?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess it has changed in some ways. I feel like, you know, obviously I'm always I'm not so much a city break guy. Okay. I do have a lot of great experiences with that, but I'm more of a, you know, go somewhere outdoors and see somewhere beautiful nature type of guy. Not shy of a cocktail though, James. I will say that. You know,
I've seen that firsthand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't need to be like dangling off cliffs to be happy. I'm quite happy to be looking at cliffs with a margarita. That makes me happy too. And you know, have you heard this flashpacking phrase? I don't know if it's just it's a thing.
Yeah, flashpacking.
Yeah. So I would say that's where, in my sort of mid-20s, where I worked, we used to get a month off at Christmas. I think because our boss basically just wanted us all to go away.
Yeah.
So we started like going on these longer adventures, to New Zealand or South Africa or wherever there. And, that kind of like inspired the spark in me, James. I've completely lost all I can think about is pub crawls now. Was I talking about pub crawls?
You're talking about, what were we talking about? No, what did I ask you?
Anyway, it couldn't have been that.
What type of traveller you are?
Pub crawls.
Yeah.
That was where the answer I was getting to. No, and so we would go on these trips, and that was almost like, that's where the flashpacking came from, as we would go on these month-long trips. And a lot of it would be sort of like backpacking and camping, but then every now and again we would go to somewhere quite nice, like a little eco lodge or a little place on the beach or whatever. And the thing is, like, luxury is completely relative. So, if all you do is stay in 5-star hotels, it kind of blends into itself, right? And then it's not, it's what it is. But if you like camp out and stay in a shitty hostel for 4 days and then you go to a really nice place, it's the most amazing thing you've ever done.
Nothing better.
So, yeah. So that's what we're about. Yeah.
Are you one of those people who can camp in the middle of nowhere with a tent? Are you quite comfortable doing that?
Well, I mean, it depends where the nowhere is, I guess. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with that. Depends, though,
Because you see, like, people walking these, like, huge routes. And there's a guy I'm following at the minute on Instagram. He's walking the world. I think it's on day 480 or something. He's in Tajikistan, I think he is right now.
Oh, cool.
And he just camps wherever he finds a spot. To me, that's quite hardcore. Because you're alone. There's probably wildlife about. People might turn up. Like, I don't know how you can truly relax, but I guess it takes a certain mentality to do that. But people can do that, people can't do that. I particularly can't, but I'm intrigued by people who can for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done anything as hardcore as that, but I have always sought out that kind of like solitude in the outdoors piece.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. Like, I want to go somewhere middle of nowhere, wild, and just be there on my own. It's nice to go with friends or family, whatever, but I love that feeling of being there completely on my own, because I think you get a different hit from it in some ways. And there's a little bit of that trepidation, but at the same time, I think when you solo travel too, like you do a lot of solo travel, things happen, whether it's the way that you're experiencing it, who you meet, or like the way you're taking stuff in, or, you particularly in that kind of thing, you're able to pay attention to the experience, or you have to in a way. More and be present more than if you were just shooting the shit with someone whilst camping. So it's a different experience, but yeah, I love that. Actually, I really seek that out.
What's your view on traveling nowadays with maybe smartphones? Has it changed the game in terms of experiences?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it has. I mean, for good and bad, right? It's completely changed the game. Like when I first went backpacking, here's showing my age. Like it was the age of internet cafes. There was no mobile phones, and there were mobile phones, but only drug dealers had them. It was one of the, it was the,
and you could play Snake, and that was it.
Yeah. And the car salesman, and you could play Snake. Yeah. So I think a couple of things on that. Obviously, there's a lot of benefit you can get from in terms of research and finding out the right places and stuff like that. But there's also that's also a double-edged sword, My friend Brian Thacker, who's an Australian travel writer, he wrote this book called Where's Wallace? And his premise for that was, by the way, that's not the funniest book he ever wrote. The funniest book he ever wrote was called Rule Number 5, No Sex on the Bus. And that was...
Fair enough.
True stories from his life as a 18 to 30 tour guide leader.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right.
But Where's Wallace? What he decided was that he was going to find 3 of the most random places in the world that he didn't know a single thing about. He was going to intentionally not find out anything about them at all. Not the languages, the currency, nothing at all. Like the state of security there, nothing.
Right.
And just turn up, and he wasn't going to use a phone or internet or anything the whole time. And he ended up having these like crazy adventures. But what he said was everything was amazing. Like, he met some guy who took him to this forest that showed him this mountain, And it was amazing because it was a surprise. And then, he got a boat to this beach and it was amazing because he didn't even know this beach was here. Whereas what we do now is we'd be looking it up and this would be the number 4 beach in the area to go to. And what you need to do is go to that guy. And so you take that element of surprise out of it. And so I think that you're losing something of that wow of discovery and surprise. We're trading like accuracy of the things we should do for the freedom for things to happen.
Spontaneity.
And I think, the spontaneity. And I'm sort of, my jury's out on that a little bit. If you're because if you only got a week, right? You sort of want to make sure that you're doing the best things you can do in that week. And I get that. But there is a price to pay for that. I don't think many people see. But if you have longer than a week, right? And you've got a little bit of extra time, I would definitely make in, I think there's definitely a place for that spontaneity and just letting things happen. And I do think I'm a big believer in putting things out into the world too. Like, and I'm not like kind of saying that you can manifest stuff in the world. I mean it like more literally like that than that. Like maybe you can, but I mean it more literally in the sense that I think that like, one of the things everyone always says on the podcast, and I've personally experienced, I'm sure you have too, is people, for the most part, are kind, generous, lovely, amazing people. If you go somewhere and you have culture shock because it's like somewhere you've never ever been before, that's because it's somewhere you've never been before and you don't know how to be in that environment. And that does make you feel nervous. But if you, as a result of that, see thieves and muggers in everyone around the corner, right? What you're putting out there is this kind of like element of fear and mistrust, right? And like people then get off on that and they are a bit wary of you too. But if you can do it and you can just say, you know what, people are all around the world, by and large, like don't go to some crazy place that you shouldn't be, but by and large, far and large, the people are good people. And if you go in there with a smile and an open heart and open arms, then you're going to get that back in return. And that is, probably the number one advice I always say to people to travel is, it is scary sometimes going somewhere where you are completely vulnerable because you don't speak the language, you don't know the customs, you don't know where to go, you don't know anything. You're completely reliant on people. And so you're completely vulnerable. That is scary. But if you know where that's coming from, and you can somehow still put that to one side and just trust in the goodness of people, then I feel that trust and goodness is reflected back in your experience and the people you meet.
I totally agree. Could not put that better. And it's amazing how many experiences you remember from those situations. And I sort of feel bad about this because I did travel Southeast Asia for 3 months with my friend, and that was before smartphones. I can recall pretty much most of the stops on the way, probably some people we met, some things that happened, funny stories. And I repeated the trip again with my partner. And this is not on her. This is just in this situation about, must have been 6 or 7 years later. Smartphones were a thing. I remember having them. You just don't remember the individual points as clearly. You remember the highlights, probably the highlights probably. But that trip before in 2013, 12, where it was, that was specific to like each location. Oh yeah, we met this person. So it does give you something extra where you're trying to work out this place. I mean, for example, when you're trying to get to Cambodia in those days, you just speak to your hostel and go, well, how do I get there? Well, if you go down the street, you'll find someone you can get a ticket from. Like, it is that raw.
Yeah.
And it is that learning experience that you probably do remember quite the most, I think, instead of just going on Google and checking it. But I do wonder these days if you were to on purposely not take a smartphone, take a classic burner phone, like you said, and try and do a trip like the old days. I wonder how that would go. I
mean, who knows? I think it'd be difficult because it's so ubiquitous in our culture that, whoever you're speaking to has got a smartphone, right? Like, I think it'd be hard to do that. But I don't know. I think it's worth trying. It's an interesting one. I don't do it enough. Actually, here's a thing. Do you know a company called The Adventurists? They're brilliant.
Okay.
Do you know what? I'm going to connect you with them. You've got to get one of them on the show. But they kind of specialize in this area. So they create these like unroutes, they call them. They're like the anti-packaged adventure travel people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it's like basically like drive a rickshaw from here to here in India, but you don't have a map, you don't have anything, right? You just have to like get there. Like the map you have is the size of a napkin, and you've got to travel across, so there's no detail. But they do stuff like that. They do like they have a rally where you have to drive from London to Mongolia in a car that cost you less than £1,000.
Oh yeah, my friends have done that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love this. So they're all about this, like the real adventure happens in the unknown, in the places where you don't know what's going to happen and what's going to expect. And that is for them what the definition of adventure is. And, not everyone might want to like do that. But at the same time, I feel like we can dip our toes in that in a few different ways easily.
Yeah. And maybe to help alongside that, if you've got a smartphone, but you do want to take it with you, I was then thinking the other day, well, maybe not get an eSIM or a SIM card. Maybe just rely on the odd bit of Wi-Fi here and there where they might have it. Yeah. And just obviously have your VPN available, but just maybe do it that way where it's not constantly available. That might enhance the trip as well.
Yeah, just use it as like an emergency phone type of thing, but trust yourself to figure out most things,
Yeah.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Cool.
And is there a place that you traveled to where you did experience culture shock?
Yes. I mean, there's a couple, but like the one that really comes to mind is I was in Morocco, which is an amazing place to go. And I was kind of in the foothills of the Atlas Mountains. So it was about 2 or 3 hours outside of Marrakesh. And I was with a guide, right? We were I was kind of going around this whole area with a local guy who was kind of introducing me to people and stuff. Anyway, he's like slams on the brakes and stops all of a sudden. He's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe how lucky you are." And and basically we're in the middle of nowhere. And there's this thing called a Festival Fantasia, which is like this traditional show of horsemanship that dates back, like the Berbers were the Immersion, they call themselves, like, they were the people that never surrendered. They're like this warrior culture originally. And the word Berber actually comes from what the Romans called them, which was barbarians. And
okay.
But they have these traditional shows where villagers would almost like compete against each other, and they would have these horses like decked out in this amazing kind of gear and stuff like that. And the goal was to ride this line of like 5 horses as like uniformly as possible, and then all fire your gun at the same time, as if it was like a mock charge. And so there's that. And then next to that is this huge full-on market, like, not a tourist market, like things being slaughtered in front of you type of market. and I was just like such a person of interest, what the fuck was I doing here? And that's a legitimate question. So that was definitely somewhere where I felt, somewhere in the middle of that crowd, I felt a little bit like, what am I doing here? Am I supposed to be here? Am I offending anyone? I don't know where to go.
A bit uneasy.
Is this vibe okay? Is it uneasy? Yeah. And that's real. That is, when you feel that in the moment, that's real. It was fine. And I guess I tried to use that experience later on as an example of, I actually had an amazing time once I started speaking to the people that ran the stalls and just being more like, "Hey, how's it going? I'm here. Nice to meet you." Like overly friendly.
Right.
Everyone was great. And it was an incredible experience. Got some of the most beautiful photographs I've ever taken. It was just one of those moments, yeah.
And like on the flip side, have you experienced reverse culture shock?
What is reverse culture shock? Is it just when you hate where you live?
Yeah, in layman's term, I guess.
I have at times, yeah.
You probably have a great time in Southeast Asia, 3 months, and you get used to the customs there and how it works.
Reverse culture, yeah.
And you come back to the US or UK and it's like, why are things so miserable or whatever? Yeah, have you experienced that?
Yeah, I don't. I have a bit. I don't think I've been away long enough since I was, much younger. I do shorter trips. I got, family and all that. But we did this really cool road trip through Patagonia, and it was like the kids were really little then, and we were just driving on these sort of dirt roads, and staying in these like little local kind of hostels stroke people's houses. It was cold, there was everything, it had to be like wood burning stoves and all that sort of thing. And so it felt, at first you're like, oh, this is like going to be quite an adventure. But by the end of it, we absolutely loved it. Obviously didn't want to leave.
Aaron, I've got a question for you. What is your opinion on the art of storytelling? How important is that in terms of podcasting, but also sharing stories with people in person, but trying to inspire people to travel or even listen to your podcast? Like, how important is that?
Well, if you could expand that question out, make it a little bit broader and deeper, James, then something as broad and deep as that already is. I don't know how to answer that. No. Well, I guess I have a few things to say about that. There's a lot to travel writing in some ways, and I could go into that if you want, into the sort of like nitty gritty of travel writing, which I've worked really, really hard at for the last 18 years, right? But I think essentially, first and foremost, it's about a great idea. Anyone can have a great idea.
Yeah.
Right? It's about the story begins with a great idea. And there's some things that I can't speak to, blogs and new media and that. And I'm sure a lot of people listening will be really focused on that because it's a great opportunity. But in terms of traditional journalism, which I think there's a lot of wisdom that translates to the kind of new stuff there as well. In terms of that, like the idea is king, right? It's like if you have a good idea, that carries you a really, really long way. So I think that's the first part of it. And I think the second part of the kind of art, quote unquote, of travel writing happens when you're on the road as well, right? Like, I think it's about how you approach that trip. Like, I very rarely have written about stuff that I did, when I wasn't thinking about writing it. Like most of the stuff I've written about has been on an assignment when I know that I'm writing about it. And so like how you mentally approach that is really important, especially for travel writing. One of the things that's really unique about travel writing as opposed to other forms of journalism, like news journalism and that kind of thing, right? You can't have any of yourself. There's no subjectivity into it whatsoever. Yeah. Science journalism, whatever. But with travel journalism, there is this little like element of subjectivity that you have to put into it, right? Because it's about how you experienced it. I'm talking about first person narratives mostly now. And so that makes it this like really unique and creatively satisfying thing, but also uniquely difficult. And I think it could be argued, the most difficult form of journalism in some ways, because you have to fully commit to it. So I think that have a great idea, and we can talk about what that is. And then when you're on the road, a lot of people think, wouldn't it be great to be a travel writer and travel full time? Answer, yes, of course it would be great. But I don't think that the travel that they do when they're on holiday translates to the sort of travel that you do as a professional travel writer, if you're really taking it seriously. First of all, it's a lot busier. You don't have a lot of freedom, right? What you do is you have a story, you have an idea, and then you have a minimal amount of time, because what you're trying to do is, like, every day that you're away is a day you're not making money, right? So, if you're trying to do it professionally, what you're trying to do is capture a story as fully as you can within the minimum amount of time, right? And so every day you try and pack with as many things as you can that helps you tell that story. Interviews, experiences, guided things, food, restaurants, and all that stuff's amazing. But in a normal holiday, you wouldn't pack like 5 or 6 of those things into a single day. You'd have a bit of time to chill. So I look at that as a great benefit. I'm really so grateful to that, because it's pushed me out of my comfort zone. It's made me like meet people and do things I probably wouldn't otherwise do. And that makes it great. But if you think that it's going to be relaxing, first of all, it isn't relaxing in the way that a traditional holiday might be. But the main reason why it shouldn't be relaxing to you is that you have to really pay attention. If you want to write about this thing afterwards, you have to really, really, really pay attention. And part of that is capturing the information of it. Like travel writing is informational, inspirational. Part of it is capturing the information of it. And that is, a job, but it's a doable job, right? The other part of it is the inspirational piece. And that's the piece I love. And that actually helps me get into the moment, into the feel of a place and what I'm doing. I get really obsessed with taking notes. I take far too many notes. I love it. I have one of those little black moleskin journals, and I do it old school with my pen. And I love it, because what I'm always trying to do is like capture something of that feeling. when we look at a clip on social media or a video on YouTube or whatever, that's great. It gives us a sense of what something feels like, but it gives us a sense of what something looks like. It gives us a bit of that wow. But I don't think that's why people travel. People travel because of the way it makes them feel. And what you're trying to do with good writing or good audio when it comes into podcasting is put people in those peak moments, in those amazing moments that they're the stories that they come home and tell all their friends about. Can you craft that? Because you don't have many words either. Can you craft in a paragraph, a few sentences, something of what it feels like to be there? It's a really hard thing to do. And in order to do it, you have to be really present when you're on that trip. But at the same time, you have to be like really not present, because you have to be thinking about how can I convert this feeling that I have, this place that I'm in, into words that I can share with people later. And if you get that right, it's the most amazing thing ever, because I've shared something of what this incredible feeling is with someone that I don't even know. And hopefully that sparked, in one in a 10,000 people, a little kernel of something that maybe makes them want to go and do something cool. And that's why I do it. But yes, I would say the way you approach it, the idea and the way you approach it is absolutely key. And we can get into the nitty gritty, but I'm going to be honest with you, James. I don't know if I can waffle on about this stuff.
I actually got a question with your podcast. Yeah. So have you used those skills in journalism to use it for a script for your podcast episodes? Because equally you've got to make them as compelling for each episode, because you've got to draw the person in, tell the story, don't waffle on too much, get to the point. That's a bit of an art to get right. And obviously you had years of experience of doing it, but it must have been helpful having that journalistic experience.
It's the same exact thing. It's just a different approach, different format. I'll break it down in my personal thing. You obviously have your play, you do this incredibly well yourself, so you have your own format and your own style, which I love. But I'll just break down like how I guess approach a different piece depending on what it is, right? So the on location documentaries that's like the biggest beast of them all, so I kind of work up to that. If it's a straight interview, right, as you're interviewing that person, what you want to have is basically like a sheet of paper or some notes or whatever. You've prepared enough that you kind of know the stories and the themes that you want to bring out of that person, but you're listening enough to be curious about what their responses are and to be following up. But you're also always listening. I call it like my quote radar, right? You're always listening for the quote. You're always working towards a piece of the story that you want to tell, right? Like I recently interviewed a marine biologist about the Great Barrier Reef. Amazing, right? But the thing that he really wanted to focus on, because this is what was interesting to him, was the science. And that's great, but I can't do an hour episode about the science, right? What I want to also get into is what it feels like to be under the water of the Great Barrier Reef, what it feels like to dive for the first time. And so it took quite a lot of work to like bring him around to that side as well. And then I was only able to do that because I had a vision of what that episode would be. So I'm come prepared with what that will be. And then when that audio is finished and we've got the audio, we build a transcript and then we edit it really tightly. All content, no matter what you do, has to be edited really, really tightly. Pace is super important. Like I always say that with writing, it's about pace and it's about rhythm, right? Words, sentences, writing has a rhythm to it. It sings. If you do every sentence in this rhythm that I'm doing now, and every sentence that follows is in this rhythm right now, right? That becomes really boring. But if I do every sentence like this and it sings and it glows, and the more I do it, the more it grows, like then I'm writing, right? And so you want to write with rhythm, but you also want to write with pace. You want to take out all the bits that aren't really focused on what that story that I hoped to tell in the beginning was about. And in the Great Barrier Reef example, it was about, like, what was the one thing I wanted to convey with that interview? Well, the one thing I wanted to convey in that interview is, what's it like when whether it's a snorkel mask or you're diving, the moment that you go underneath the waves and you see the Great Barrier Reef for the first time? I wanted to get that.
Yeah.
Right. And it took like a 45-minute interview to get that. And obviously that doesn't make up the whole interview, but that was like my focus to begin with. And so I was kind of teasing the interview around that as much as I could. And he was amazing in the end. So he sort of made it easy, like pace, rhythm, like prepared in the way that you put it together and cut it really, really tight. So that 45-minute interview becomes a 20-minute interview of really good stuff. Right. And then you go into like the on location things that you do, right? Which are really, really well done. And just to do a kind of critique of why I think the stuff that you do is really, really well done is going back to that pace piece. Every single minute of that is used intelligently, is used planned. You've planned that out for me. And that as a listener is you make it easy listening. Like there's a famous phrase, which is easy reading is hard writing. And it's obviously the same with audio. But no doubt it took you a hell of a long time to create that piece on San Salvador using all that on-location audio and those interviews and all that rich stuff and the voiceover and the scripted piece that you did. But the reason why it was so great to listen to is because you'd spent that time. And one thing flowed into another thing. I was never bored. So it requires that sense of what is the essential? What is the story I'm telling? What is essential to tell that story? What is like bringing that story to life? And everything else, just cut it out. Unless it makes you laugh. I'm a big believer in, if it makes you laugh, just shove it in somewhere. But yeah, focus on the essential, and with writing, a good example of that is, I used to get sort of stuff I used to edit a very small travel magazine, and, you'd get these people would send in finished articles as pitches. Never do that. That's a whole other conversation.
Okay.
And if it was a safari, let's say it was a story about a safari, and the story was about, I don't know, seeing their first lion or something like that, right? This would be the way they did it. We landed in Cape Town and it was really sunny. We rented a car and then we drove 4 hours to this national park. And when we got into the national park, we paid our price and we dropped our bags off. And then we started driving around and we saw a couple of impalas and this. And eventually then we saw a lion, right? But if you really want to do good travel writing, you start
with a line
with seeing the lion.
Yeah, that's what I would do. And I'm not a writer.
Exactly.
That's what I would jump straight into. Yeah,
I know. Well, I think you are a writer. I think you're doing yourself a disservice because the way you put your podcast together is writing. It's doing it in audio, but it is writing. So you understand the structure and the pace. You're a pro at it. But you start with the lion, and then you think about that experience with the lion, and you think, what is the piece of that experience that I want to focus on? Well, let's say it's looking a lion in the eye. So let's start with that as the first line. When I looked in that lion's eye, I knew it was hungry, and then build off of that. Who gives a shit about your plane flight and all the other stuff? Of course, yeah. Right. So go to the heart of the action, go to the essential piece, take people to that peak moment, and then focus on the part of that experience that is the most powerful to you. That is the piece of that you want to share. And when it comes to audio, do that, but add music, add ambience, and add a lion growl. And you're absolutely swimming there.
Do you think it's also crucial for podcasts so my take on this is for the first 30 to 45 seconds, it will be arguably the best part of the podcast, but not all of it. So what I think is I need to lure people in a little bit to the lion roaring or looking at me in the eye, or it could be the volcano in Guatemala kicking off, to make the listener want to hear or know more about it. And then at that point, you start the journey up to that point to draw them in. It's kind of playing a little bit with the listener, but I do wonder if you agree that for any podcast really, the first 35 to 45 seconds are key because you've got to keep the listener there and keep them engaged, right?
Well, so the way I recommend doing that with a podcast is, and yes, you're absolutely right. And that is the essential thing, whether it's an article or a podcast is can you capture people in the first 30 seconds? Because otherwise they're gone, right? They have a lot of other things vying for their attention. Yeah. So with a podcast, what I recommend is no matter what the format, choose 30 seconds of the best piece of that podcast and drop it right at the top as a teaser, and then do your introduction.
Yeah.
Right. But have someone at the first go, I couldn't believe it. I looked that line in the eye and I saw it walk towards me. I've never seen power like that. And I instantly knew my place on the food chain. Welcome to winging it with, you know what I mean? That's how you do it. Right. And so it's the same thing with whatever format you're doing, but you're absolutely right. You have to think about, how am I going to compete with all the other shit that people have competing for their attention? Because that's what you're up against.
And do you think there's a perfect amount of time for a podcast in terms of length?
Well, you know, it's funny. I always say that the perfect amount of time is the shortest amount of time it takes to tell that story as best you can, right? Okay. It's like, never say that this podcast needs to be half an hour if it works better at 20 minutes.
Sure.
Never say that, it has to be 45 minutes and it works better at 50, right? That is the huge benefit of podcasting, right? Like with a lot of writing, you are confined by a word count. You're given 1,500 words to describe something, an experience. And so you're leaving a ton out. And it's a great discipline to do that. I would recommend to people if they're just starting out with travel writing, or they're trying to get think of an exercise to kind of challenge themselves. Like give yourself 400 words to describe that trip. Give yourself, 800 words, whatever it is. Confine yourself. What are the things you're going to tell to make that happen and come alive? Because that will really train you for all the stuff we've been talking about. But one of the gifts of travel writing is that you can go beyond that. You can really get into that, and you can allow that character of the guest and all of that to flourish. But you can't get too carried away with it, right? That's the thing. Like, don't get too carried away with it, because what works is well-paced, really well-paced content. And you get that by being a ruthless self-editor. There's a famous quote by Einstein that I can't remember, but basically, to paraphrase, he says, it's not intelligence that has taken me to this far. It's like curiosity and like a dogmatic self-criticism. And curiosity is the essential part of travel writing. I'm going to be curious about everyone I meet, about every place I go. But it also has to be critical. And the critical piece for me comes in that when you write it and translate it to someone else. And when you write it and translate it to someone else, you have to take something of yourself out of it and put yourself in the shoes of that person reading it. And a lot of the time, you're going to have to take stuff out of there that was maybe your best bit. But if it doesn't translate, if it's slowing things down, if overall it's making the whole worse than that one part, you might have to cut it, because ultimately it's about putting forward one piece, one complete kind of structure, and that is the thing that you're showcasing to the world. And it's not an exact replica of what your trip is. Another thing I would say, actually, this is another thing that people often get wrong, is your travel article doesn't have to be the way you did the trip. It never, let me tell you, the travel writers that are published in all those sorts of magazines, none of those articles are the way they did that trip, right?
Right.
It's the way it works narratively. They did all those things, but it's the way it works narratively. Yeah. So let's say you decided to go and do a story about salsa dancing in Cuba. And on the first day, you salsa danced with a master. And on the second day, you went to an introductory lesson. And on the third day, you embarrassed yourself in a club, right?
Yeah.
If you were to tell that story chronologically, it would make no sense. If you flip it on its head, the first day you embarrassed yourself in the club. The second day you took a lesson. And the third day you danced with a master and got it. That's a story, right? Yeah. And so when you go to a place, you capture all the bits that you need to tell the story, but then you tell the story as a story in the way it works narratively.
So as a story, this is going into sort of the travel aspect of it. How do you make it as authentic as possible? Because I can imagine there must be some circumstances where, let's say you've got a trip booked and it's pretty planned out, right? And the article is in your mind and you got an idea, but the trip just turns out to be maybe not even that good, a little bit boring. How do you try and seek an extra bit of storytelling there, or an extra experience you can fit in? Because I must imagine that some people have just like written about stuff that actually is a little bit of a fabrication on the truth, because the trip actually didn't turn out to be as what they expected.
Well, I think this is the problem with like effectively paid for content, right? A lot of travel influencers get paid to go to a destination and cover that destination. And so then they're already in a contractual agreement with that destination to cover it, and expected within that is to cover it in a positive way. And I will say also that you don't see many like travel hit jobs. Travel is an aspirational form of writing, you know.
Right.
If going back to the traditional journalism piece, right? If I do a trip, and which has happened, you know, a gazillion times, right? The people that want to put that trip together with me as like we're kind of negotiating what that trip should be, and they're insistent that they're going to put this museum in and that or whatever, right? Well, if I get to that museum and it's great and it adds to the story, then it's like, brilliant, that was a great idea. But if I get to that museum and it doesn't add to the story, or it wasn't a good experience, what happens is it doesn't get included. Like, the edit point is whether you're included or not, right? Like, I'm not going to do a hit job on something. What I'm going to do is tell a story about something. Well, I mean, I guess there's a few times you might do a hit job on something, but for the most part, that little museum in wherever might be trying really hard. It's just a shit museum, you know, but the people there are lovely, right? You know, and so what I'm trying to do is say, like, here's my aspirational piece about salsa dance. And by the way, I'm fucking terrible at salsa dancing. Just ask my wife, who's brilliant at it, right? I would never do a piece on. I don't even know why this is my example. I'd never do a piece on. I'm like the perfect. Maybe I'm the right person to do it because I'm so bad.
It sounds quite an article.
Yeah. There you go. But you know, I don't think you'd cover the bad club you went to and the bad teacher you had. If you only had a certain amount of space, you'd cover the great teacher you had, the great club you went to. True. And that's how it naturally forms out. The problem is, as we're talking about, is when you're contractually obliged to cover that content. And what I would say then is, if you succumb to that and you cover and you say things are good that you don't think are good, then you have sold out, right?
Yeah.
So what you have to do is find a way. Find what's in that you find interesting and that you think your audience is going to find interesting, right?
Yeah.
And almost always there's something in there, or you shouldn't have taken the job. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like you've got to go into that job with an idea of a story that you think is going to work, right? And like, you have to go into that with that. Otherwise you have no foundation for it. If you're just going into it for the paycheck, then you might well be in trouble. But if you have gone into it with that, then I think it's kind of a parallel to interviewing someone. Like, you might interview someone that you don't think is that interesting in real life. Like, maybe they're just like whatever, right? Like, I don't know. But if you really listen and dig down and are just curious, just like spark that inner curiosity, then you're going to keep asking questions and you're going to find something that connects with you and with that person. Guaranteed. It always happens.
Yeah.
If you really work at it. And the same thing will happen on a trip too. Like, I'm going to this place because I want to do a story about the wildlife, right? Well, you might go there and you might have zero wildlife sightings. That's the nature of wildlife, writing about stuff like that. But there might be a whole conservation story, or there might be some other story related to that you've discovered there. But you know the angle that you want when you go in there. You're talking about nature, you're talking about that connection to it. And so you're looking for those stories that emphasize that and that curiosity. And I've never had a situation where I've had tons of situations where I've been disappointed by things that I thought were going to be crucial to the story I was telling. Tons of them. I could even say that happens on most trips. But I've never had a situation where I went on a trip and didn't find one thing or two things that I was interested in, one person that I thought was really cool and interesting, and wasn't from that able to turn it into a story that I could stand behind.
And have you been on a trip before where, let's say it's a personal trip, but the experience or the story is that good that you just had to pitch it out to someone because you think it should be shared? Have you had that experience before?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So I can't speak to blogs and social influencers and stuff like that because, as you know, I'm a dinosaur. I don't know if this is going out on YouTube. If it's not, I'm 25 and 6'4". If it is, you get it. Anyway, so all I can speak to is about the way that the stories that sell generally to editors. That might be the editor of a blog. The stories that are generally the ones that are going to sell and excite people the most. And those stories are one of the most important pieces of those stories are the why now of that story, right? Yeah. You could go to a beautiful, amazing beach in Vietnam and have an incredible time at a festival there. And granted, James, right? Like, there's probably a blogger who's going to take your piece, but the Times, like the magazines and newspapers of the world will never take that piece. And the reason is because there's nothing newsworthy about it. There has to be a why now. Why tell the story about this Vietnam beach now? Well, it could be because it's the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, which is actually now happening right now. And so that's a great opportunity to offer that, the hook of that, the peg of that, hang a bunch of different stories, right? But there has to be a why now. Why is it relevant to talk about Vietnam now? And there also has to be a repeatability factor. If you talk about your personal experience in a festival on a beach in Vietnam, that's just sharing your personal sort of diary of it. Mm-hmm. Really, travel writing is more about inspiring other people to travel. So it has to be a repeatable element to it. So you have to tell stories that are relevant and repeatable. And that makes it much harder to sell a story. Like, you could have an amazing itinerary, an amazing trip. And like I say, I'm a dinosaur, so I'm sure that would do really well in a lot of other formats. But generally speaking, I would advocate for planning way in advance for topical hooks that are coming up that you can hang stories around. And then you build those trips 3 months, 6 months, 12 months ahead of time. And you do those you build those hooks 3 months, 6 months, 12 months ahead of time. And you do those trips in advance so those articles can be published at the time of those hooks happening.
Yeah.
Right. So it's about planning in advance. That's how I approach pitching ideas.
Okay. We're approaching the end of the episode. So I'm going to just ask a couple of travel questions and then finish with your podcast, and then we'll go into my feature at the end. Because I've got a few things on here actually for travels. You've been trekking with Shugendo monks in Japan. That sounds quite an interesting
and I'm really
experience.
Sorry, James. I've rabbited on. I appreciate that I have gone on and on. So I'll keep this to, but now you're asking like the big question. Like, those were the questions prior to this that I should have done concisely. And if I'd known you were going to Shugendo monks, I would have kept it to a minimum. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. Ask the question about that so I don't rabbit on.
What is a Shugendo monk?
So Shugendo is a form of, it's like a kind of Japanese religion that combines traditional like pagan Shintoism with Buddhism. And so what it holds is that enlightenment, whatever that means to you, is not found through inner quiet as it is through other forms of meditation. It's found through immersion in the outdoors, in the outdoor world.
Okay.
And like full on physical exertion and test. Like it's full on. Like, it's not just go for a walk and think about it. Although that is what I think it should be, but that's another topic. What these guys do is, for example, they train themselves and then they meditate. There's a sacred waterfall at the end of this trek called the Nachiotaki. And on the sort of tributaries of that, they will, in winter. So in winter in this part of Japan, it's the Kii Peninsula near Osaka. It is, it's freezing. It's proper winter. It's snow and ice below freezing. And they will meditate under these waterfalls, like immersed in these frozen waterfalls, for 45 minutes. And most of us would have hypothermia in a few minutes. But they do this because they're able to, they're trying to test their ability to mentally regulate their their body temperature and mentally control their sort of panic around it. And so it's stuff like that. It's stuff like they would hike this, continuously for 100 miles without stopping. It's like intense stuff like that. But they think that this gives them special powers, or that's like the legend of it. And if you've ever seen those karate movies where they do like sort of Matrix style, they jump up and then they're like kicking 500 times before they fall down.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Stuff like that, or they like fly up a thing. That is based on these legends of Shugendo monks, where travelers would come in and they'd write these legendary tales of monks who could just fly up a tree and like all this sort of stuff like that. So it's based on those Shugendo legends. But I got to interview a Shugendo monk, and so I obviously asked him, like, what's your superpower? Like, why wouldn't you ask that? And he said, my superpower is I'm able to look inside to people's hearts and understand how to help them. And I was like, wow. Damn. I mean, it's not as good as flying, but it's a close
No, it's up there, isn't it? You say it to him. It's not as good as flying.
I wish I
Imagine
had.
that.
No, I wasn't brave enough.
What's interesting for me is with that sort of mentality and ideas is like, well, what's the end goal? Because you can just keep on going. You march around 100 miles back to back, so call it 200 miles. Or why not do a third one, make it 300? Like, how far do you go to get to a point where it's enough to be accepted? I don't understand how you work that out.
Well, I don't think the exception is, well, I think it's a great point, first of all, but I don't think the exception is externally. I don't think you're doing it to test yourself to a bunch of external monks. I mean, maybe you are. I don't really know, to be honest. But I think it's about an inner thing as well. It's about, can I force myself through enough of this that I find some peace of quiet within? Other forms of meditation are about, can I focus on this one thing enough that I find this bit of peace within? And they're like, can I like go for it enough that I find this one piece? But they're both geared towards that same thing. So I guess you know it in yourself would be my answer.
I'm so cynical because I would just say, well, you can just lie, can't you? Yeah, I think I've reached that point. But have you actually?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well, this is when you get kung fu kicked to the head, James.
Yeah. I should not be doing that interview.
Because they read your heart inside.
Yeah.
You know you're a fraud.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Okay. And the second experience was descending volcanoes in Iceland, which is a bit more nature based in a way.
So this isn't as hardcore as it sounds. Everyone can do this, which is cool about it. I was one of the first people to do it. But basically, there's this volcano in Iceland. It's not that far from Reykjavik. That when most volcanoes explode, right? Like they explode outwards. And all that sort of rock and rubble from the mountain is thrown away. But this volcano, for whatever reason, when it exploded inwards. And it, like, if you can imagine it, like the explosion sucked all of the lava and all of that inwards, and created this massive cavern. So basically but they didn't know it was there. Like the volcano, I don't know. Have you been to Iceland?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like more volcanoes and waterfalls per square inch than anywhere else on the planet, right? It's amazing. But so they didn't know about it. And anyway, this caver called Arne Stefansson, I want to say, it's an Icelandic name, so it's hard. So you'll have to forgive me. His first name is Arne, and he was a caver, and he discovered it, and he'd never seen anything like it. So he abseiled down into it with his friends and discovered it. But now what you can do is there's like a pretty, like, maybe the lifts that they might use to wash like the windows on a skyscraper.
Oh, yeah.
One of them.
Yeah.
So that is lowered down, and you go down like a couple 100 feet, and then you're at the base of this volcano. So the beautiful thing of that is anyone can do it. And when you get down there, I mean, and it is still adventurous. Like it's quite like, vertigo and stuff going down. And when you're down there, it's pretty full on in terms of, what you're doing. But the experience of going down there was like unlike any other sort of cave I've been in. I've been lucky to go to a couple of different caves and stuff like that. And I always think it's very cool to be in that underground environment. But this was like so different. And they've got these lights that are shining on all the walls. And you see all these like scars where the lava had flown down. And it's like there's like these kind of subtle colors, and it's really beautiful. And I don't, like, whenever I've been into caves and underground before, and you see like the stalactites and the stalagmites, and you realize that they grow like an inch every 1,000 years, and you're seeing these ones like 3 meters long, and you're like, fuck. But and it's like that. You get that sort of feeling there. You get the feeling of geologic time and how vast that is and how small you are. And I always think that is a great hit if you can.
Do you know what? This might be a basic comment, but there's something about caves, isn't there? When you get in there, there's a feeling in the air. I don't really know how to describe it, but I went to a cave in Lebanon, and they're like strictly like no videos, no photos, but of course people just sneak a video in. So I got some photos, but the boat goes through and you just can't believe the colours, the space, how big it is, how long it's taken to get to this sort of like formation, like why that shape. It is mind blowing. I think every cave you go in has got something going on. It's quite unique.
And you know, people might think like, oh, it's a cave. It's a work of art. You know, when you go down there,
exactly that.
It really is like a work of art. It's incredible. And then there's like always that moment where, you know, you're about a couple 100 feet in or half a mile in or whatever, and then they're like, hey, turn off your head torches. And then you realize what proper darkness is, you know. And that's when you realize you got a guide and you can find your way back out again. Like I say, soft adventure.
Yeah, I kind of remember the caves in Ninh Bình in Vietnam. I don't know if you've been to Ninh Bình, but you can do a boat ride through the caves.
Yeah,
it's like Halong Bay on land. It's crazy.
Wow, really?
But yeah, incredible experiences. Yeah, you just can't believe what you're seeing. But they found that super cave, didn't they, in Vietnam? Is it Vietnam where they found the biggest cave?
Yeah, it is called. I know this because I've actually written about this before, so I should know it. But yeah, it's the biggest cave in the world. It's so big that there's parts of the cave where you could fly a Boeing 747 through it and the wings wouldn't even touch the sides. And it goes back so far that like they haven't even got close to mapping it. And if you want to go into an expedition of that cave, I think there's only one company that does it. I can find that out for you later. But it's like 3 days and you're like trekking for 3 days through this cave. Wow. And you just get to a place where there's a really hard wall to climb and sneak through, but it goes on for miles and miles after that. And there's places where like there's tons of endemic species, but there's a few places where there's like holes in the roof of the cave where light shines down, and where that light shines through the day, there's just like a strip of life, and then that's it.
Do you find it incredible that people just like, how have we not found that for hundreds and thousands of years? That's crazy, isn't it?
And what else is out there, mate?
Yeah, right? Yeah. My word. If that doesn't get the juices flowing, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not listening to this and hoping to like duck your head underground, what are you doing?
Okay, that brings us back round to your podcast, which is an adventure travel podcast. So
is that ducking your head underground?
Yeah. A little bit, yeah.
Covering your ears.
Yeah. Nah, it's decent. Can you tell the listeners, just to remind us what the podcast name is, where people can find it, and how frequently you release an episode? Yeah, thanks very much, James. So the show's called Armchair Explorer. We originally I came up with this idea in COVID because I was a travel writer but I'd also like worked in studios and was a musician. I loved music, you know, that was my first love. And I always thought about how could I tell the stories that I'm writing about, a little bit like what we've talked about today, but add music and other things like that to it. And I saw like, wow, I'd really love to try and do that. So COVID happened and obviously we had time on our hands. So I started doing it then. And it's just evolved and grown. And the sort of original premise of it is the world's greatest adventurers tell their best story from the road. So, you know, we've had some well-known people, you know, whether it's Ed Stafford training the American or it's a mountaineer Conrad Anker on his like most dangerous climb. But we've also had just normal people like me and you that have gone on and done extraordinary things. Mm-hmm. You know, the person that's quit their job and trekked for 1,000 miles across Africa, or driven a rickshaw across India because they're absolute nutters and they don't understand how dangerous the roads in India are. Yeah, you know, crazy. But it's really about trying to tell those stories, but we do it not as an interview. We try and do it as a
like almost like a kind of radio documentary or something. So it's like, it's really focused on the continuous storytelling and lots of music and lots of sound and ambience to try and immerse yourself as much as possible. So that's the sort of number one format we do. And then we do a lot of on location documentaries as well, where I'll go, or sometimes we go, sometimes there's a couple of friends of mine or other travel writers and that might go, and we record that whole experience a little bit like you do. In fact, let's just call this an online job offer right now, James.
Oh,
I think you'd be absolutely fucking brilliant at doing one of these.
Oh, do you reckon?
Wow. I do. After listening to your El Salvador piece, I do. So it might be someone like James that we send there and just record your experience of it. And what we try and do is like get that in the moment stuff, like
key, crucial.
I don't want to hear about what it's like to do the insane zip line after the fact. I want to hear the fear in your voice as you walk up to it, as you get strapped in. I want to hear the scream as you go down it. I want to take people there with you. So that's the whole sort of premise of the show, is immerse people in incredible adventures and places around the world and cultures and people, and then hopefully inspire them to live life to the full. The slightly cheesy line that I always end with is, but it's something that I try and live by, is the more that we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. And what I mean by that is the more what you pay attention to matters. So the more that we look for what's beautiful and amazing in the world, the more we pay attention to that, the more that stuff becomes a part of who we are, a part of us that we take with us into the next day and the next day and the next day. That's really important. And so I guess that I hope that these stories inspire some small part of that, as your stories do too, mate. Like, that's what I think travel at its best is all about, is about inspiring you to live life to the full and see and connect with people in places that you didn't know about and spark that curiosity and just, that's what life's all about for me.
Could not agree more. And it's crucial, I think, for getting people just to take that little bit of risk.
Yep.
Because it's easy to just think about it and dream it, but when you've got someone telling you about it, like your guests or you or I on my podcast, take it to the next level, you're like, oh, maybe I should go and do that. And you've heard someone's experience for them, and you think, oh, I should be experiencing that. That is the reason why I do it, just to get them to make that extra leap.
Yeah, and I'd encourage people to go back on your feed and check out some of those episodes, because you've got tons of stuff there where you're interviewing people that are just sort of normal people like me and you that have gone on and traveled the world, right? And something about listening to those stories lets you realize that it's possible. And a lot of times we get stuck into this kind of clique of it's not possible because I'm supposed to live this life, and that's cool, right? Like, kind of that part of that is always, real. But can you find a window in your life to do that big adventure? And it might be one big adventure, or maybe it's 1 2-week adventure every year.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, can you put yourself out there and maybe challenge yourself, or maybe just like spoil yourself with exploring the world, whatever that is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think your story about the Great Barrier Reef, because I can't swim. So I've got a bit of a fear of deep water. It's a big thing. But I would love to really give it a go and get over that fear. I think that's my next big adventure travel idea is, can I go diving somewhere like the Great Barrier Reef or somewhere?
Oh, what a great story.
Yeah, like to start from scratch where I'm trying to literally learn to swim and not be freaking out in water to the point where I'm swimming amongst the Great Barrier Reef. That'd be a great story, I think. And
Mate,
one I'd be willing to do.
You should do that.
Yeah.
You should totally do that. It'd be a great story, a great YouTube series as well, right? Like, we're encouraging all those people that so many people have a fear of deep water. Like, I grew up with that too. It's a very sensible fear, right? Like, evolutionary speaking, it's a very good fear to have. But I was super afraid of deep water. And then when I started diving, that fear went away. Okay. Like, I still don't like being in crazy deep water on the surface. But if you take me diving, that fear goes away. It's so much less scary when you go under the water. It's because you see it all. You're in control, and you realize how peaceful and beautiful it is. So
I can't even imagine what it's like. It's beyond my comprehension a little bit, because I can't even just go and dive in a swimming pool.
It is, because it literally is another fucking universe out there, James.
Yeah, that we don't know anything
and
about.
It's 70% of our world. And it is another world. It's another universe completely. So yeah, dipping your head in there and checking it out is a lot of fun.
I'll hold you to that. It's on record now. So yeah, I'll hold myself to that, should I say.
Yeah.
And where can people find your podcast? Just like maybe websites, social medias, and where they can listen to it.
Yeah, so Armchair Explorer, just search it up on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Armchair Explorer Podcast is the Instagram. That's the social we're usually on. And drop me a line there, as well. I'm always interested to hear like what other people's adventures and dreams are, and kind of chat travel. I always say, like, if you like travel and adventure, we're probably going to get on well. So
yeah,
come and hang out.
It's a safe bet. Absolutely. Just don't talk football, because Ipswich are doing badly.
Ipswich.
Yeah. Okay. Gonna finish we're gonna finish the episode with
that. You brought it up, not me.
Yeah, let's move on. Some quickfire travel questions. These are the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay. Oh god.
Some favourites, some stuff like that. So some people don't like these questions because people get a bit funny about this, but I'm going to kick off with your 3 favourite countries to travel to.
New Zealand. Well, you know what? It's controversial, but I would say America, because it's so varied. You can spend the whole life in America. And Patagonia and Chile is probably my favorite trip, but I would probably say if you're new to Latin America, Costa Rica is pretty high up there.
Okay. And if you could go to 3 new countries tomorrow, where are you going to go for yourself?
Well, it would be a lot of Africa, I think. Like, one of my things is climbing Kilimanjaro. So my dream trip would be to do Kilimanjaro and the Great Migration. So that's Tanzania and Kenya, but let's count that as one. And then Indonesia. Everyone talks about how amazing Indonesia is, and so I'm desperate to see it. And third, Iran, because it gets a bad rep, but everyone talks about that. I actually have a really good friend of mine who's Iranian, and I'm really sick of Iran getting this bad rep. They're absolutely beautiful people and one of the most welcoming, friendly countries in the world. So I'd like to go and check that out.
That'd be awesome. For us, it's not possible, but I think it's one of the best places for couch surfing, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I had a few people on the podcast say they couch surfed it.
There you go. There's another
Amazing
YouTube series, mate. If you can get that, if you can blag it.
The problem with our passports that we can't go without a guide, right? But I think now if you've got a Swiss passport and an Irish one, you can just go and do whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe not Irish now, but I think like any European passport can just go and be there as a normal tourist. So yeah, that's what people do apparently. Unbelievable.
Amazing. Okay,
3 favourite cuisines worldwide.
Ooh.
What are your favourite foods?
Well, Thai. Love Thai. Thai's got the Thai. That's really hard, actually. Can I say my fish and chips from this one place in Scotland, Stonehaven? Yeah. Absolutely love that. And oh my god, cuisine. So there's a lot of food I like in Latin America, but I'm not going to go there because I wouldn't call it my favorite. So I'm going to go back to Asian, and I would say Japanese, because there's some incredible. I love sushi and all of that, but there's also like these incredible things called kaiseki. I'm sorry, James, I've forgotten it, but there's like these incredible feasts you can have where there's all these different flavors all at the same time, and there's nothing like it in the world.
Okay. What about 3 favorite high adrenaline activities that you've done?
Well, I used to be a really big rock climber. Loved that for a lot of years until I got old and just completely bottled it. But no, I still love rock climbing at a less intense level. But it's not extreme, but hiking is my first love. That is my first love for being in the outdoors. And skiing. Since I moved to Colorado, I've fallen in love with skiing. I don't know if that's extreme enough for you, but that is, in the outdoors, my
the high adrenaline
things.
For sure. Yeah. Touch on hiking. What about 3 favourite walks or treks?
Oh my God. Just like such amazing questions I've had no time to prepare for. 3 great walks or treks. Okay, so number 1 that you have to do is, it's called the High Sierra Loop. It's in Yosemite. It is, I want to say 54 miles, something like that. And it's all in the backcountry of Yosemite, up super, super high. And you walk between these old, historic camps. And so basically what you can do in these camps, some of them have been around for 100 years, is you can stay in these sort of dorm tents and stuff like that. And they do these family style meals, and they'll give you a packed lunch. So basically what it means is that you can hike the entire perimeter of Yosemite's backcountry with only like a day pack on. And that makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more attainable for most people. And it's one of the most beautiful hikes I've done. So I'd say that is incredible. Just throwing out a couple of others. The Kumano was the hike I did in Japan. 100% do that. El Hierro is like the Canary Island that not many people know about. People obviously know Tenerife and that. There's this amazing pilgrimage that they do every so many years there. But you like follow the coast and all that, and you can stay in these little B&Bs as you go. So that's really beautiful. Top. That's just top of my head. I love long distance hikes. So that's top 3, I guess.
Okay. And are you a sunrise or sunset person?
Sunset, cocktail in hand, mate.
That is the most popular answer by far. I actually thought it'd be sunrise, but hey. What do I know? Well,
I love a sunrise once I'm up, but if you were to say to me at 6 a.m, what do you prefer, sunrise or sunset? You know what I'm answering.
Okay. If tomorrow you can sit for an afternoon somewhere with a cup of coffee or a cocktail and just watch the world go by, where are you going to sit?
Sit tomorrow somewhere and just watch the world go by. This is so hard, James. There's so many places that I would probably like to go to. If it was like a city sort of place, it would probably be somewhere European, I guess, because that's always a lot of fun. I love Barcelona. Lived in Paris for a while. That's lovely. But I think I would prefer like just like a little mountain town somewhere, know?
Yeah.
Just somewhere that's like, imagine you're sitting somewhere and you've got a balcony and you've got a great view of the mountains, but there's like a little village bustling around you underneath, and you're going to pop out in a minute and get some bread and stuff like that. And you've got a hike coming on later in the day. Yeah. That would probably be my favorite place to sit. And Slovenia is somewhere that I haven't been that everyone tells me is amazing for that kind of thing. So
yeah, incredible.
Some village in Slovenia.
I did interview the person who does their official podcast.
Really?
Yeah, Feel Slovenia it's called. I think it's
award-winning
now. Yeah. Noah does it. Dr. Noah Charney. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. Right. He's the only, we think at the time, he's the only multilingual writer in the country who speaks Slovenian and English. So he does it in both, right? And the podcast. So it's quite unique. I think he married someone from Slovenia, so he's there with his kids. But he's
cool.
Got an interesting story. What about if tomorrow you're going to live somewhere for a year and it can't be UK or USA? Where are you going to live?
You're sort of going back to favorite places to live, but for me, it would be somewhere in Asia. Like, I guess it would be New Zealand in some ways, because New Zealand has like been I think New Zealand's one of the most amazing countries in the world. It's so easy to travel. There's so much incredible landscape and adventure. Like nothing can hurt you there. There's like zero natural dangers. Like, so I guess I'd love to live in New Zealand, but going back to Indonesia or one of those, somewhere in Asia. I've never been to Australia either, so going up to maybe North Queensland or something like that. But I guess I'd choose New Zealand.
Okay, a couple more questions. Is there a place or two that you just would never go back to?
Disney World.
Interesting. Okay, I totally agree. Never been, but I still agree. And the last question is going to be, if you can give 1 or 2 sentences as to why someone should go and travel right now after listening to this episode, maybe take a leap into the unknown, different culture, a bit of a risk. What a bit of advice could you give them to make sure that they get planning and get booking that trip and get out there?
There's some really cool quotes that I've collected over the years.
Love quotes.
Yeah.
Love them.
And I'm going to stall right now as I don't just look them up.
Great podcasting.
Yeah.
Cheers, Google.
So here's one from Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah.
20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover.
Yeah, that's great.
You can't beat Mark Twain for a quote, can you?
No, you can't.
No,
any more, or
you're
going to finish on that one?
Are you kidding me? Follow Mark Twain? Fuck off.
Okay, Aaron, cheers to the episode. It's been a great chat.
Oh, it's been so good. Sorry to end on the F off. You've been amazing.
Has a podcast ever been ended with that? Especially a travel podcast. Hilarious.
Oh, no, thanks so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. It's been always fun to hang out, so I love it.
Yeah, and I think people should get something out of this, hopefully. And whether that's starting a podcast or going into travel writing or even just traveling, I think there's plenty of nuggets in there for people to get going with it.
I hope so.
Appreciate your time.
Mate. All right,
appreciate
mate.
it.
Keep up the good work too. Keep spreading the good word. Keep spreading the Mark Twain gospel.
Yeah.